Right. My top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it in order.
Sure.
I'll do it in order. Let me just get them in order. I've got the box rec in front of me, not because I need the help, just because I'm just trying to get them in order so I can tick them off one by one.
It's a crutch, Kyle. Box rec is a crutch for you, man.
I know.
You've got these books coming out now, according to your Twitter bio. And,
yeah, I have. I worked on them for 6 hours today.
Yeah. Well, I know what it is you've just printed out pages from box rec and stapled them together.
Yeah, there you go. Oh no. Oh no, you figured me out.
You printed out the box rec wiki.
I'm absolutely devastated.
Being a shift manager at Jack in the Box must be brutal. If Andrade thought this was a better way to make a living.
And they stopped the fight because they counted you out and they ruled that you were knocked out.
Do I look knocked out? Do I look like I'm wobbled?
Well, you only have to be knocked out for 10 seconds.
I wasn't knocked out. I wasn't knocked down.
What have your doctor told you?
His only loss, strange enough, has been to a Korean, Jung Koo Chang. Sounds more like the takeaway than the fighter. That was back in '84. That was
Armstrong belongs to a long line of Negro champions, and tonight he's boxing better than ever. A little dark, mighty atom, vibrant with energy, attacking unceasingly, pouring in with his head down, hardly ever giving the other fellow a chance of hitting out against the amazing machine gun fire of the Negro's fist.
Welcome to the Fistorical Perspective. Hey, welcome. I'm Connor Ruebusch, and this is the Fistorical Perspective. We've not done one of these since 2015, but I am very happy to be doing it once again, and you know what that means. With me is Kyle McLachlan, boxing historian, Muay Thai historian and analyst, and all-round cosmopolitan guy, and soon-to-be published author of some boxing history books.
Hello. I'm trying not to laugh because that hey was just far too... Oh, when you said you were going to introduce... I always pull back the curtain, don't I, and explain to the listeners that we planned this sort of intro out, and yet when you said you were going to lead with hey, I thought you were just joking. And when you came out of it, I've been trying to stifle a laugh ever since.
I went for it, man. You got to commit.
Marlon Brando would be coming from the grave to ask for your tips on acting. It was highly impressive.
Hey, how do you act so excited? Well, with Kyle on the other end of the line, it is difficult, but I muster all of my energy.
To act like Connor Ruebusch, that's my dream. That's my nightmare.
Oh, we're having a good time already.
Yeah, man, we got to have fun.
Of
but
course.
This serious topic of the history of combat sports.
Right. So we're here today. We've decided just to throw ourselves into it. This is a show that looks at boxing history, and today we've decided mostly to educate you and give you some of our insight, mostly Kyle's insight in this case, but also partly to troll you. We've decided to call this week's episode, this new, brand new episode, 10 Fighters Greater Than Floyd Mayweather. Why would we do
I just felt something get me in the back. A dagger. Someone got me. They've been waiting for this.
The role of Maury audience on this episode was played by Kyle McLachlan.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
So we're going to talk about pound for pound greats. And the reason we do this, right, is not, we don't want to shit on Floyd Mayweather. That's the mistake that a lot of, and we'll see some of those mistakes that a lot of boxing historian types make, is to just view everything that happens after a certain date as complete garbage and trash and just unworthy of any consideration. They'll never accept it on its own terms. And we don't want to do that. I think Kyle and I would both agree Floyd Mayweather is legitimately an all-time great. Is he in the top 10? No. And we'll find out who occupies that rarefied air. But Floyd Mayweather can still be a great fighter. We can put him in the context of this sport that has existed now for like 2 or 3 centuries at a stretch, and maybe just put into context some of the TBE talk. Because I'll tell you what I saw, Kyle, after Mayweather-McGregor happened. On more than one occasion, I saw publications that I would consider relatively respectable say things like this on social media. Now, with his 50th win with no defeats, Floyd Mayweather surpasses Rocky Marciano for the greatest boxing record of all time. And
the boxing record, this famous record that doesn't exist.
Right. Why?
Because
who decided?
let me get something straight here.
Yeah.
Everybody says undefeated, right, yeah? But they've started saying perfect record now because I think so many people harped on about the fact that Ricardo Lopez retired 51-0-1.
Yeah.
But the draw, that's a blemish. The draw against a fighter that the win was... The draw was avenged. It was a technical decision draw. The win was... It's not a perfect record, though.
Right.
Just as a little proviso, Ricardo Lopez does not make my top 100 of all time.
And he made it to 51-0. Like, that's the point.
51-0-1, and he's a great fighter. Certainly one of the most interesting fighters to watch from a technical perspective.
Sure, a Nacho Beristain classic.
A lot of people would have Lopez in the top 20, 30 of all time.
Because of the record.
Because he's one of the most famous little guys, and he's one of those names that your average fan of boxing history, not boxing historian, but a fan of boxing history, a fan of the classic fighters, would reach into their pocket and pull out because it's a bit of a hipster's choice.
Right. Finito is a little more obscure than like saying, "Oh, Muhammad Ali," like.
Yeah, and
but
quite
it's not...
possibly those are the same guys that might have Mayweather in the top 5. Now, if I may say, if you want to rank Floyd Mayweather as the greatest fighter you've ever seen, or the most versatile fighter you've ever seen, or if you think that he would be a brilliant fighter in any era, I would not dispute it for 1 second. It would be indisputable.
Yeah. But
I just want to get this out of the way, Connor, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to open this episode and think that it's one of these fuddy-duddy boxing historian podcasts where they just overrate the old fighters and just shit on anything modern. That's hipster. I want to, if I may, I want to quote from a fantastic book by Mike Silver called The Arc of Boxing: The Rise and Decline of the Sweet Science. It's an amazing book, mainly based on statistics that show that fighters used to fight a lot more often. Which I don't know about you, but I actually think it's great. I mean, if you do something often, I think you prove your versatility. Also, got to remember these guys fought regularly. They had to be proven in order to get to the top. You fought every style regularly, and it was only the creme de la creme that survived this shit. Excuse me. That rose to the top.
Yeah, I think some of those eras, like the 30s through the 60s, a lot of divisions were basically, by the way they're designed, they were just testing for the smartest fighters, like the people who could adapt the best on the fly, who could understand.
No footage, man. You can't just pull up a 35mm reel and study your opponent.
Right, exactly. So
you
you fight all
the same shows. You might see them on the same shows. And you're watching them at the time. It's not the kind of thing you can keep reverting to.
But you're fighting sometimes dozens of times in a year. And to keep up that pace without killing yourself, you have to, the only way you can do that successfully is to be a smart fighter who knows how to not take much damage. And to do that and then become great, to survive that kind of testing ground and become championship caliber. I do think that is why... Justifiably, a lot of people who look into it tend to think that the greats of certain eras in the past are a little greater than the greats of today. But I don't think that. I think the mistake is taking that into its illogical conclusion, which is that the greats of today aren't great at all in comparison.
Certainly. Before we get this quote, let's bear in mind we're looking at numbers. Is 50-0 that impressive when it's taken over 20 years? Is it that impressive when taken over 20 years, or is 20-0 in the space of 1 year more impressive?
Right.
Or are they equally impressive for different reasons?
Right.
And that's something we're going to have to look at, because looking at the criteria and the criteria that we all have, everybody has different criteria. So as I say, if you want to say Floyd Mayweather is you think the best fighter of all time, TBE, as he very cleverly marketed, be my guest. Back it up. That's the only issue I have. A lot of people, they don't back it up. I don't know if you saw what the other day I had a massive argument with a guy on Twitter, mainly because it was funny. Who was claiming that Chavez was not given any shit for fighting journeyman. when he was in his prime.
Yeah.
My point was that if he's fighting 3 or 4 world-class fighters in 1 year, that's what you look at, not the other 8 or 9 guys he smashed up to keep busy because he could.
Right.
You don't look at the negatives, you have to look at the positives. Of course, you judge the negatives that happen in somebody's prime, because that may be indicative of them as a fighter. But you do not, I mean, Chavez was still winning those fights. Like he was fighting, like Nicolino Loche, one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time. There's loads of reports of him in Argentina basically doing nothing and winning the decision because he could.
Right.
And they would keep busy fights. That's a problem.
But I think like the keep busy fight, while it's exploitative to a certain kind of fighter, to the professional opponent or the journeyman, and I guess that's the downside. The prevalence of stay busy fights or stay sharp fights, or however you want to call them, back in eras, that era, is what made those fighters so perceptive, so calm and poised, and so tactically brilliant in the ring. Because, unfortunately for the journeymen they were fighting, the club fighters they were beating up, but they had opportunities to just style on people between their tough fights against people near their level. And
this, by the way, this is not about Floyd Mayweather not being that great because he didn't keep busy fights.
Right.
Let's just say that.
This isn't a side. We have a tendency to get sidetracked when we chat.
This is about not taking credit from those guys. For me, the whole point of ranking fighters is Mayweather, if he was fighting in Ike Williams' era, he might well have been even greater than he is now.
Sure.
But, shoulda, coulda, woulda, basically. I'm going to go on the evidence. As a historian, I owe it to myself to go on the evidence. This is what is not going on the evidence. To go back to this quote. Bill Goodman, who is apparently... just going back, he was a cornerman, a cut man, etc., etc. So he knows, in the 50s, late 50s, New York State Athletic Commission certified. He's seen fighters from ringside. We need to give this guy's opinion respect. The difference is, though, again, going back to these old school guys that rate the fighters of their own era higher than of later eras, is that there may be a bit of rose-tinted spectacles going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that was the case, you would think I would have Mayweather, Bernard Hopkins, Manny Pacquiao in the top of all time, and none of that is true, or Juan Manuel Marquez. However, what I do not do is use my eyes to look at these guys and denigrate them all the same. Bill Goodman says, and I quote, "What comes to mind when I watch today's fighters are the words unskilled labour. Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Oscar De La Hoya are the best of unskilled labour. They stand out because there's nobody around. They also stand out because they resemble more of what we used to see." So he is giving him some credit there. They look like the old timers.
They only stand out because they're a shadow of the past.
It's a facade, because Bill Goodman tells us, and I say we have to respect this guy's opinion, Mayweather and De La Hoya are just better. Let's say that again. Mayweather and De La Hoya are just better, so by the slimmest of margins, better than average second-rate fighters. It's not even the best second-rate fighters. The average, they're only just better than the average second-rate fighters. That's the way I look at both of them. Now, that is the kind of shit that gives quote-unquote boxing historians a bad name.
Yeah. Because it's a second rate, it's not reasonable. Like I think that you can look at Floyd Mayweather, and I think there are a lot of things you can say about his connection to boxing's past. Charles Farrell has a really good piece about his black code fighters, as he calls it. But his main point is that Floyd Mayweather, he also comes down really hard on modern fighters. He tends to, Charles Farrell. But his main point is that Mayweather recalls an old style, the style of like the Black Murderer's Row. And I think he's right. And that is part of the reason why he stands out.
I come down hard on today's fighters, man.
Sure.
I come down, but it has to go both ways.
Yeah.
You can't look at today's fighters and say they're not as good as the 40s, and look at Jim Corbett and say he looks good on film.
Right. You can't look at like Max Baer and been like, he could have been one of the greatest if he'd been more serious. Like, he was okay. He wasn't you know.
Yeah, he had a good chin. But if you see the footage uploaded last week, Abe Patel versus Johnny Kilban, two of the literally greatest fighters ever lived, and they look terrible. And it's not even like 1893. It's like 1900s, where there's already... Yeah, you're taking everything into account. The longer... It was 20-round fight. No inch was given by either man. It's a very tactical fight. Kind of like watching, I guess... I don't know, for a modern example... Think of a modern example where fuck all happens in a fight between two top-notch fighters. Zab Judah versus Junior Witter, something like that.
Are there Rigondeaux fights that might work for that?
Perfect example. Guys, I have to drink a lot of water tonight because I've got a very, very sore throat. I've been a little bit under the weather. It's such a shame, man. The big comeback, and I've got a flu.
I've got allergies. I'm sucking down phlegm over here.
Yeah, all right. It's not a competition. I'm more ill than you are.
That's true. All right, I'll let you have it. That's fine.
I took one day off work last week. I haven't taken a day off work in many a moon.
Maybe if the sun would just shine once in the place where you live,
do you know what?
You would be able to recover.
Bad, but today it's pissing down with rain, and I've taken the dog for a walk.
I kind of feel like I would like that rainy weather.
I've got rain on.
I kind of feel like I would like that weather. Right. By the way, I don't mind it.
I love the weather. It's not when I'm under the weather. Do you know what I mean? It's just not great, is it? Yeah. But look, you have to go back to my point again.
Right.
Tangents. Get used to it, new listeners. People learn more of our fucking tangents than they do of most people's main topic discussion. I have to look at fighters like Jim Corbett, Jack Johnson, and say that, quite frankly, if Mayweather wouldn't last in like Williams' time, then Jim Corbett would not last against someone like Marco Hook.
Right. Yeah, you have to put in context. And that's not to say also that, like, Mayweather, I think, is a standout fighter of today for how he compares to the fighters I would consider to be the best of all time. And so, like, he's kind of out of his era. Well, also at, like, Corbett's time, you had, like, Joe Gans, who I think might have performed very well even today, who had a style, I think, that was really adaptable and clever and really kind of looked ahead of its time. So it's not like nobody knew what the hell they were doing back then. It's just that the requirements for what it took to be considered a great boxer or to be a famous boxer were maybe a little less stringent. And maybe back then it was kind of like the heavyweight era in MMA now, where it's like the biggest guys were really, as a rule, not that athletic and not that great to begin with, and they had to work really hard to be skilled fighters. I think that's what we're looking at with guys like... eras like Corbett and Fitzsimmons, even though I do respect those guys a lot, of course.
Also, if you look at someone like Terence Crawford, who's a fantastic fighter, Mayweather this doesn't really apply to, but a lot of people, when they compare today's fighters to the old school fighters, they forget that someone like Crawford, who's been weighing like 150, even for like his 135-pound title fights, he's not going to be fighting Aaron Pryor in 1981. He's going to be fighting Donald Curry. You know what I mean? Like, if you have to make weight on the day, these guys that come in a little bit, you know, Canelo is never going to make 154,
right,
and fight Raul Dupas. He's going to be fighting Bob Foster,
right? Yeah.
I mean, there's no super middleweight division, and the guy he might be able to make middleweight on the day and be relatively safe. But, you know...
God, Canelo versus Bob Foster. That sounds amazing. I mean,
but
Jesus.
The same goes for Golovkin. Golovkin weighs 171, 172 in an era of no super middleweight. He might not be able to make... We've seen him make the weight. He's not a huge middleweight, but he still looks drawn on weighing.
If he was fighting 20 times a year sometimes, there's no way he would make middleweight. I don't think so.
No, and he might be fighting someone like Michael Spinks.
Right, yeah.
He might be fighting someone like Billy Conn, who's only 168 pound, 170 pound naturally weighed.
Yeah.
But that's a guy who fights heavyweights. There's also the possibility, and hear me out here, that Golovkin could knock down Joe Louis.
Sure.
He could give Joe Louis a fight, as Bob Pastor did, as Billy Conn did. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
But there are some fighters today who get by purely on the amount of titles there, purely on the amount of weight divisions they are, purely on the fact that they can cut a load of weight, like when Adrien Broner smashed up Gavin Rees, who was not a natural, you know, that weight. He was a fat, naturally weighed guy. You know, there are guys like Robert Guerrero who would be a good contender from, like, I don't know, lightweight to light middleweight.
Mm-hmm.
But But the thing is, we rate these wins for Mayweather. Mayweather rates himself so high because he says nobody's ever beaten as many champions as I have. That means nothing to me for the sheer fact that when you look at other eras, didn't have as many champions to fight.
Yeah. The belts today, I think that this is the annoying boxing historian opinion that I have to keep touting and shouting from the rooftops. The proliferation of titles today makes them essentially meaningless in the boxing world compared
but
to.
Also, not even that. It makes the achievement of it meaningless. It makes guys that like Adrien Broner. I'll tell you a great example of a universally beloved fighter, especially by myself, Miguel Cotto. How many championships? Tell me, how many championships did Miguel Cotto actually win?
I don't know. He had
one.
Did they give him the ring title for beating Martinez?
Yes.
Okay.
He won one.
That's it.
Now people might say that's unfair. The fact of the matter is, other people had careers quite similar to that.
Sure.
Quite similar to that. Young Corbett Free, fantastic fighter, won the welterweight championship once, beat some of the best welterweights and middleweights of his time. You know,
there are plenty of great fighters who never won a single world title, who are really great fighters. Like Sam Langford stands out, but you also have a lower tier guys like Benny Briscoe, Harold Graham, never won on the world stage, and these are still very good fighters. It's not a knock.
Packy McFarland was the best fighter from lightweight to nearly middleweight, and if people think Mayweather gets the plaudits of TBE today, they want to read some old school reports of Packy McFarland.
And didn't he go 84-0 at one point or something?
Essentially, yeah. Recently, as I told you a long time ago, the one loss on BoxRec was erroneous. It was not right, and they finally taken that off.
Yeah.
A lot of draws on there. Some of them, like the British press, had him beating Freddie Welsh. The British press.
Yeah.
In a draw. At that time, the lightweight limit could be fought at 132 pounds, and McFarland couldn't quite make that for much of his career.
Man.
But he beat Jack Britton, who's a top 5 welterweight of all time. Welsh, top 15 lightweight of all time. He came back in a very sort of prototypical Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler and fought Mike Gibbons, who was one of the best middleweights of the era, who Matt McGrain of the Sweet Science has in the top 10 middleweights of all time. I do not have him that high. I have him top 15, top 20, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. That is the kind of shit. That's an undefeated run.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the draws. If you look at the reports, most of them fights, Packy McFarland whipped the other guy. Newspaper decisions, everyone told him up, and we probably still got more research to do, newspaper-wise. We might, till Steve Compton read every single newspaper about Harry Greb, it was assumed that Gene Tunney had won all the fights after the first. And in fact, Harry Greb, the second fight, it was seen as a robbery. These are the kind of things you need to take into account. When you come out of a top 10 of all time, you can't just say, right, these fighters are great and I like him a bit more than him. My top 10 might change exponentially in the next 6 months with the research that I do, and a fighter that I never really thought of before might become one of the best fighters of that 6 months or that year. He might be on a great run, and that might be a great win for some guy, and that might go, wow, actually that puts that whole run into perspective.
Yeah.
Somebody you might not think was top 15 might become number 11 or 12, because when you are looking at fighters this great, you are splitting hairs. You could have a top 40 and not arrange any of them and it not actually be wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're splitting hairs when you get the fighters this great. But when you get to Mayweather's part, I have him ranked about 31 to 40. You can pretty much rearrange those guys, and you could, but to get to the next tier, it's difficult. If I may run down the kind of guys that Mayweather's in the company with, so nobody thinks I'm underrating him, is that all right? Yeah,
because you rate your fighters. What you're saying is you rate your fighters basically in tiers of who they're in company with for
until I get to the top 10.
Right.
Yeah. But again, it's sort of interchangeable up until the top 5. I'm pretty sure the top 5 or 6 is locked, and they may change every so often.
Yeah, so basically, this is Mayweather. He's between 31 and 40, and these other guys are fighters that he has a lot of parity with, that he could hang with.
I'm not going to run down all of them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give some example of some of these guys in this tier. So you've got Floyd Mayweather, again, not in order. He's not the 40th by any means. Eddie Joffre, probably the greatest bantamweight of all time.
Yeah.
Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Carlos Monzon, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., obviously, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, Michael Spinks. Now, people are going to come at me for Mike Spinks. I say come at me, it's fine. Gene Tunney, Vicente Saldivar. Next tier up, 21 to 30. There's some of the guys that don't make the top 20. I'm not.
Why would they, just by the way, why would they come at you for Mike Spinks?
I think basically Spinks's light heavyweight era was on the cusp of a great one.
Yeah.
It just finished. He feasted on some out prime guys, but he feasted on some prime guys too.
Yeah. Spinks
and
Cowie is my shit, man. I know I've had about 4 podcasts lately where I keep mentioning Dwight Cowie, but
I think to give you an idea, I mean, I tend to rank on achievements, not on the eye test, but that is probably the most cultured left-hand performance you can capture on film.
Right.
The way he tees up Cowie with the left hand is unbelievable. 21-30, just a few examples. George Dixon, Sandy Sadler, Fighting Harada, Jimmy Wild, Ike Williams, Kid Gavilan, Pernell Whitaker. Arguello was also in the 31-40 bracket.
Yeah.
So before we get to the top 10, these are some of the guys that don't make the top 10. To give you an idea of how really tough it is to get in the top 10 for me personally. Packy McFarland, who we just mentioned. Joe Gans, who we've mentioned. Again, this is in no order. Terry McGovern. Tony Canzoneri. Joe Louis. For me, the second greatest heavyweight of all time. Jimmy McLaren. Sugar Ray Leonard. Archie Moore. Benny Leonard. This is pretty esteemed company.
Yeah.
Those guys don't make the top 10. If those guys don't make the top 10, how is Mayweather going to make the top 10?
Yeah, and some people consider like Archie Moore to be a top 3, top 5 pound for pound fighter. Like, just shows you how
arguable.
Yeah, how close it is at this point.
Some rank Marciano and Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey in their top 20. I do not.
Sure.
I actually rank none of those guys in the heavyweight top 10. Jack Johnson maybe number 10 on a day. It's always between him and Liston for my number 10 spot. Again, if anyone wants to come at me, I'm on Twitter.
I'll stand with you for Liston, man. I'm all about Liston getting that spot.
Man, Liston could make that spot. Heavyweight's a hard one. One day we'll have to do that. We'll have to do a top 10 heavyweights.
Sure.
But
anyway.
If we go into the top 10,
yeah,
pound for pound.
So these are the 10 fighters. We're going to start at number 1.
No, we're going to start at number 10.
We'll start at number 10. Okay, so these are 10 fighters.
Go, oh man, that's his number 1. I don't care about the rest.
I thought before when you introed it to me, but that's just me not understanding.
No, that was just me reading it to you. Yeah. Well, I was getting them in order because, like we discussed beforehand, the order on a few of these guys does change.
Yeah.
But they are very, very close. Number 10, above Benny Leonard. Some people are going to really, really dispute this shit. I do not care. But Barney Ross, top 15 lightweight of all time. Basically, a few non-title lightweight wins. Not much actually at lightweight. Canzoneri twice. Didn't really defend the lightweight title. He beat Canzoneri at 135, and he also inherited the junior welterweight title. Goes on a run. In my opinion, he's probably the greatest lightweight of all time. And then he gets the better of the series with Jimmy McLaren to win the welterweight title. Now, this is why this is impressive. There are other great fighters or tremendous fighters on his resume. Frankie Click and Billy Petroli and these guys, Seferino Garcia. But what's important is, note these guys that he gets the better of in a series. Tony Canzoneri and Jimmy McLaren, they are both in my 11 to 20 bracket.
Yeah.
There are not many fighters in this top 10 who have wins over guys of that stature. If you watch Barney Ross on film, he holds up tremendously well. He looks quite similar to De La Hoya, very cultured, but a better boxer. Not much power at all, but made of iron.
Mm-hmm. Made
of absolute iron. Never stopped in his entire career. Went on to be a war hero. Don't take that into account, but it gives you an idea of the man. Free weight world champion in a time of that really was very, very impressive.
So let's compare. We're also. I mean, obviously, part of your criteria are what are the rankings of the other fighters they beat? Like how heavily should their wins be weighed? But what are some other things, like are there any specific details you see in somebody like Barney Ross that makes him a top 10 fighter, or is it purely based off of his accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean, people are going to say, well, Mayweather was champion in so many divisions. Yeah. Lightweight and welterweight at this time are pretty damn stacked. I think for a lot of guys, it doesn't really matter about sort of the pound-for-pound caliber of the opponent. It matters about where they were at that time. McLaren and Canzoneri are undoubtedly at their best at between 135 and 147, even though they'd come up from flyweight and bantamweight and beaten a lot of the good fighters there. Jim McLaren beat Fidel Labarba, he beat Pancho Villa, yeah? Mm-hmm. Canzoneri had fought for the bantamweight title against an amazing fighter. He had won the featherweight title He'd lost the featherweight title. He beat Kid Chocolate.
Yeah.
Twice. But when he beat him, if he just weighed in 1.5 pounds lighter or whatever it was, he would have been the super featherweight champion and the lightweight champion and the light welterweight champion. After previously nearly winning the bantamweight title and already winning the featherweight title, that stuff is just as impressive as anything Mayweather did. Canzoneri does not make my top 10. Barney Ross does because he got the better of him in the series. And usually, like, fighter A beats fighter B equals he's better. It's not always true. I wouldn't. It's kind of like not many people would rank Juan Manuel Marquez above Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, my example is always fighting Harada and Eder Joffrey.
Yeah, see, I actually have Harada above Joffrey.
Oh, well, I think some people would disagree, at least.
A lot of people would disagree.
Yeah.
My good
But
man,
it's not a...
Patrick Connor, he disagrees.
Right, yeah. Patrick Connor, great boxing, knowledgeable guy as far as boxing is concerned.
Absolutely knowledgeable guy. He's an absolute freak of nature. One of the guys I love sparring with that guy. He knows his stuff. We very rarely disagree. Something that we disagree on.
At least it's not a... But the point is, it's not a guarantee that beating somebody ranks you above them all time.
No. But Barney Ross did get the best of that series.
Yeah.
With Canzoneri and McLachlan, and those guys are just so highly ranked. It's just hard not to have him that high.
Yeah.
We can go into detail more on this if anyone wants to speak to me. But we're going to run through this. Otherwise, we could spend 2 hours on Barney Ross,
right.
and we gladly would on another day.
Yes. This is going to be a quick rundown episode of each of these fighters.
Yeah, a quick rundown to sort of show you why I have these guys so high.
Yeah. Our idea is to compare them to the modern era, and specifically to Floyd Mayweather, not to disparage Floyd, but just to give people a picture of what company he would have to outclass in order to be considered the greatest.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at someone like Bob Fitzsimmons, who have at number 9, I mean, if you look at him on film, actually his left hook to the body is very impressive. A lot of the techniques that Fitzsimmons used are actually in vogue right now with the Fitzsimmons shift, which you've seen a lot of guys using. Lomachenko, Golovkin, for example.
Even seen some more milling from some fighters lately, that milling handwork that Fitzsimmons used.
Yeah.
It's coming back in style.
Yeah, very, very bizarre fighter to look at.
Yeah, but definitely.
But he is the definition of pound for pound. He is the definition of pound for pound. He beats I actually rank guys based on weight, not the title of the weight. So middleweight, when Fitzsimmons won the title, was 154. He beats non-parade Jack Dempsey, who at his time was seen as one of the greatest fighters of all time. Bit of a drunk by this point, but still not the kind of guy to get the shit beaten out of him like Fitzsimmons did. But it's obviously Fitzsimmons' weight jumping that's most impressive. He didn't actually put much weight on. He sort of weighed like the modern super middleweight limit, knocking out sort of weights and modern light heavyweights. And no one really expected him to beat Jim Corbett, and he did. He knocked him out. And then, of course, he goes to the mill twice with Jeffries.
Yeah.
Now, if you watch Jeffries now, he doesn't actually look that great on film, and some of his training footage actually looks a lot more modern, but on actual fight footage, he's very, very bizarre fighter to watch. But to put it into perspective, we have to rank all these guys as per their era. I rank guys, how great were they in their era, and how strong was their era? Now, I don't actually think this era was that strong. Certainly not at the higher weights, but James J. Jeffries was seen as the greatest fighter of all time.
Yeah.
And Fitzsimmons went tooth and nail with him despite being a naturally smaller guy. That's the kind of shit that gets you high in the pound-for-pound rankings.
People lauded Fitzsimmons then the way they laud Mayweather now, and interestingly enough, it was for some similar reasons. Like
Science. He was a scientific fighter.
He was a scientific fighter. He even had Jeffries called his stance, his style, the crouching crab, and you could argue that that's the origin of the Detroit shoulder roll that the Mayweathers use today. You could argue that. So,
well, it's certainly it's like a prototypical sort of bizarre defensive stance.
Yeah.
But of course,
low lead, high right hand, and a lot of like evasive upper body movement. Like it was stuff that was novel at the time; it hadn't been seen before. And so, like Lomachenko now, for example, it made him stand out, even if his accomplishments didn't maybe stack up to some of the other fighters who had already finished their careers.
Exactly, and he knocks out a lot of the top heavyweights at the time: Gus Rulin, Tom Sharkey, Peter Mayer, and some of the best light heavyweights of the era. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. He beats the shit out of him before the police stopped the fight.
Yeah.
George Gardner. I mean, these guys, you can actually get footage of some of these guys, and they're kind of similar to Abe Patel, like I was talking earlier, look a bit sort of archaic. But you have to understand that these guys are fighting to their rule set. How would Floyd Mayweather look today with his bad hands if he had to fight? If he knew he had to fight for 20 rounds, you had to wear 4-ounce gloves. It might well be that he'd look quite similar. We have to take all this into account. Although I do believe that boxing has come on stronger, especially with the advent of the Walker Law, where it become more modernised. As I say, how strong was their era and how strong was the fighter? I think the era was relatively strong. It wasn't that strong, but Fitzsimmons was undoubtedly the best pound-for-pound fighter of the era. To be the best pound-for-pound fighter of a single era, you've got to rank in the top 10.
Right.
And I have him at 9. And he's certainly one of the hardest punchers of all time. That goes in his favour too. Number 8, Willie Pep, the greatest featherweight of all time.
Yeah. Without
a shadow of a doubt, for me, the greatest featherweight of all time. At the 126 limit, the featherweight as we know and love. If you look at the things that Willie Pep did in the ring, they're impressive, but it's actually what happened outside the ring that I think pushes him above for me. The fact that he had that plane crash and broke his back and what have you, and they thought he'd never walk, let alone fight, and comes back. For me, one of the greatest single wins in the history of boxing. Pep gets smashed by Sadler and he beats him in the rematch. He gets smashed by him afterwards and again. But the fact matter is that in that second fight, Pep beats Sadler, a top 21 to 30 fighter of all time, in my opinion. He beats him, and it's absolutely an incredible win. But if you look in his prime, he also had a lot of great wins. He beat the best bantamweight of the era, and a top 10 bantamweight of all time. He beat Chalky Wright multiple times, one of the best featherweights of the era.
Mm-hmm.
He fought lightweights, he fought smaller guys, he fought guys on his own weight. So yeah, he beat Manuel Ortiz, who's the best bantamweight of the era. For me, an 8 to 10 bantamweight, that's highly impressive. I actually rate, a lot of people say if you beat smaller guys, not that impressive, but for me it is. It shows that you're holding the fort. If someone can't come up to take your title, you've basically pushed down a whole division and proved your supremacy. I find that very impressive.
Sure, yeah. It's like you're annexing other divisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Expanding territory.
Like Pernell Whitaker when he beat Azuma Nelson, for instance.
Right. Yeah.
It's very, very impressive.
So Willie Pep, the oldest guy so far in your rankings, who is still commonly brought up today by boxing fans. Why do you think that is?
I think that's because there's a lot of myths about Willie Pep.
Sure. The apocryphal. Winning around
without throwing a, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
If you see some of the guys he beat, though, I mean, like guys that these people that do rate him, they don't know who Willie Joyce is, man, and like they need to.
Yeah.
They don't know who Chalky Wright is, man, and they need to.
Pep is one of the first guy you mentioned who I think Barney Ross would have done okay, but I think Pep could have competed from his era all the way to this era with basically any of those generations of fighters with his style.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah. Like, his style is maybe a little unorthodox by today's standards, but any more so than, like, Manny Pacquiao's? No. It's a lot more textbook in a lot of ways than something like that. So it's just based on, like, very good movement, excellent timing, sense of distance, and just a really diverse set of skills to punish people who take swings at you and miss. Like, I think Pep would have done well in any era.
Obviously, Pep has 2 really, really long undefeated streaks, and the only loss he has early in his career is Sami Angar, who's top 15 lightweight of all time. Some would have him higher.
So to put Mayweather's win streak in perspective, just on a numbers side, what's Pep's best win streak? Do you recall the numbers?
I think it's like over 100.
Yeah, I
might be wrong.
I thought it was at least over
numbers like that. I really.
Go on. Sorry, we're lagging a bit.
I always look at like the fighters that they beat and like how long the streak was rather than how many fights it was.
Right.
I had a quick search because sometimes like people will say to me, he's got a search, but I actually know a fair bit about boxing. The numbers can get slightly difficult.
It's just the hard numbers. That's all.
When he finally lost to Sandy Sadler, he was 134 1-1.
Right. So there must have been. There was at least
like 50 a fight or something.
Yeah, there was like an 80 fight streak or something like that in there.
Yeah, not an amazing era of fighters at that point.
Yeah.
I'm not going to admit it, but the top guys he beat are like as good as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's, as I say, you don't look at the fights against the no-opers. You look at the fights, and it's very, very. I mean, it might be that I do research on some random guy that Pep fought at some stage because I get interested in him and find out it's actually a really, really impressive win.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, he fought some really, really fucking good guys, man. There can be no doubt about it. Number 8. We on 8? No, we're on 7. Muhammad Ali.
I'm sorry to ruin it, but some rankings these are.
Yeah.
No, what number are we on?
Yeah. I'm naming the fighters, man. I can't expect that. You're the timekeeper.
Okay.
I'm the one doing the fighting. I ain't gonna. I mean, I'm gonna ask the corner man what round it is. Fucking hell.
You're just busy protecting your rankings at all times.
Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight of all time, beat quite possibly 3 of the top 10 heavyweights of all time. If you have listened in your top 10, certainly have Foreman and Frazier in your top 10, or you're a schmuck. Never legitimately stopped, only by Larry Holmes when he was done physically. It's a bit like that Ric Flair thing, when Ric Flair's like 18 time, and you think, well, you did lose the title 17 times, Flair. But he did beat Leon Spinks, and a lot of people say, well, Leon Spinks was a novice. He's not much of a novice as Pete Rademacher was, and he dropped Floyd Patterson in his debut. So for me, Ali was old. He was already suffering from dementia, and he come back and he won. And they look at he probably fought, apart from Lennox Lewis and maybe more than Lennox Lewis, more punches than any champion in history.
Yeah.
Let alone heavyweight champions, but genuinely, I mean, the punches are at heavyweight, man. These boys fought a lot of them. But did he actually get the better of Ken Norton in the series? Maybe in one of the fights, but
I actually think Norton took 2 of those fights.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But what's more important is that Ali beat George Foreman.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I was saying about Pep beating Sadler, this is that kind of victory, man.
Yeah.
You look at his pre-exile, I mean, Ali is a different fighter, essentially. He's a really fleet-footed, fast, slender guy. He comes back, he's thicker, he has to lose some weight. He hasn't quite got the foot speed he has, but now he has to show off his smarts. Erik Morales always seen as like a boxer kind of brawler. He was seen as having skill, but he was seen as like a brawler. And then when he fought Marcos Maidana, you realise that he's one of the savviest fighters of the era.
Right.
Ali had to do the same. Ali was, it's all speed, and you listen to Marciano talk about him, and he's got speed, but can he take a punch? And Henry Cooper dropped him. Well, surely Sonny Liston's going to destroy him, and he doesn't. But as he gets older, he doesn't become quicker, but he becomes sturdier. Clay, that got dropped by Cooper, would have got killed by Foreman.
Yeah,
he's a career in 2 halves.
Yeah, the Foreman. If he fought the way he fought Ali, if he was fighting the Ali who beat Liston, even he might have fucking wrecked him. Without that experience and grit from Ali, from all the time and age added between those fights.
Imagine if Salvador Sanchez had come back from the dead and then beaten Arguello for the lightweight championship. That's the kind of feat it is for Ali to come back, lose to... he comes back, obviously, he's the first man to stop Bonavena, and he has some good warm-up fights, and he loses to Frazier, and he comes back and he beats Frazier twice. The second fight's awful, we all know that. Did he really win the Thriller Manila? They both essentially... Frazier wanted to carry on, Ali didn't. But what you see is, again, it's not the result, it's what you can see with your own eyes. It proves something about a fighter. I think heavyweight is one of those things, it's... you can get a strong top 15 in heavyweight, but it's kind of thing where, like, you just kind of count the great eras on one hand.
Yeah. It's like
really, really great eras.
3 of them. 2.
Yeah, maybe at a stretch. But I think like Ali, like his era was so great. It's one of the greatest eras in history, and he was the greatest heavyweight of all time. And I think a lot of people think, if you're the greatest heavyweight, where you're the biggest guy, you're the greatest fighter. I don't necessarily think that's the case, and I think it's kind of unfair when you look at heavyweights. You can't give them the credit for the jumping in weight. Look at someone like Joe Louis, though. He beat guys smaller than him and guys heavier than him. Just like we said about Willie Pep, it's exactly the same thing. Ali, he can't move up another division, but he can beat guys heavier than him. He can beat Bob Foster, one of the top 10 light heavyweights of all time. Not that Frazier didn't as well. That's why Frazier's up there.
Your only option if you can't jump weight is to just constantly squash people who try to jump weight on you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beating prime George Foreman is an insane feat.
Yeah,
even taking in the whole hoo-ha around that fight. Yeah, Ali, I mean, essentially his career is nearly 20 years as a professional heavyweight, and for 17 of those years, give or take 2 or 3 for the time he was out, he's the best heavyweight in the world. It's Apart from Joe Lewis, unprecedented. I think he just faced a better level of competition. Lewis is still top 15 for me. Ali is number 7.
Yeah.
Now, number 6 is controversial because I used to rank this guy as high as 4. Ezzard Charles.
He fell to 6?
He fell to 6.
That hurts me, Kyle. He's from my city, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, I had a girlfriend from your city. I hate your city.
Well, you know, bad girlfriend, good boxer. So, but also Adrien Broner. So
yeah,
we might actually.
Are you actually Cincinnati? Is that where you're from?
Yeah.
Because you know I hate Cleveland, right?
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I'm a Boston Celtics fan, so I hate Cleveland more than anything. And I hate LeBron.
You're one of those bizarre people. You live in the fucking UK and you watch the Celtics.
Oh, I love the Celtics, man. I'm obsessed with the Celtics. I have 2 Twitter accounts, you know.
You are the UK's version of American fans who call soccer football. That's you.
No, I'm not. Because
they're like, I love watching Arsenal. Are you going to watch the Arsenal match later?
Yeah.
The game on the pitch will be so thrilling.
I got added into a fucking Celtics group by real Bostonians, man.
Okay, all right. Street cred count for something.
Yeah, I fucking love the Celtics, man. I'm obsessed. People don't think that. I've got 2 accounts. I've got another Twitter account just for basketball. They don't even know that I'm a boxing man until I see someone post something about combat sports and I kind of go a bit bully on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I didn't even know you had the account you have now.
I actually told a guy the other day some stuff and he said, I'm just telling you so you realise how out of your depth you are. Just a bit, how harsh is that? I don't do that to boxing people anymore, but this basketball guy's got it. Ezzard Charles comes up in like the fucking greatest era of all time, basically, and there ain't really much to say about it other than that. The Murderers Row fighters are absolutely insane, and he beats the majority of them. He beats the best middleweights, light heavyweights, and heavyweights of his era, and there is not much to say about him other than that. Watch him against Lloyd Marshall. Highly recommended anybody watch his second fight with Lloyd Marshall. Then watch Lloyd Marshall fight. What footage have I got of Lloyd Marshall that's readily available on YouTube? Because I think people need to see how great Lloyd Marshall was. He was a bit of a... Watch him against Freddie Mills, who was kind of like a really popular light heavyweight of his day in England. He was a future light heavyweight champion. Very, very basic, very, very caveman-esque. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Marshall was a bit like a prototypical Roy Jones Jr., in my opinion. As a lot of those fighters probably were. They were on that sort of level. I think if you chuck Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins there, they do just fine. But the era was insane.
Yeah.
You had guys like Holman Williams, Charlie Burley, Lloyd Marshall, Jimmy Bivens, and we're only scratching the surface. If anyone wants to read about the Murderers Row, Coco Kid, and all these guys, go and read. There's a book coming out now by Springs Toledo, but it used to be available online. It's the best boxing writing there's ever been. Ezzard Charles beats all the guys, Gus Lesnovich, and I don't want to look. I don't like. You know me. I hate cheating. I hate cheating. So I'm not going to look. But if anyone watches the second fight with Lloyd Marshall, you'll see the perfect, what I would call a boxer puncher.
Right.
People don't know what a boxer puncher is. A boxer puncher is not someone who boxes and can also punch. It's someone who, in my opinion, uses the range of boxing and the skills of boxing in order to punch. So someone who uses footwork and a jab in order to punch. Not someone like, say, if Floyd Mayweather ran around for 12 rounds and knocked someone out with a single punch. That's not a boxer puncher.
Yeah.
A boxer puncher is someone, for me, who uses the ranges of a boxer, outside range, into mid-range, to get off their best punches. If you watch Ezzard Charles against Bob Satterfield, who was one of the chinniest gunslingers of all time, he didn't take a great punch, but he fought everyone in the era and he was dangerous as fuck. That is one of the greatest knockouts of all time. He moves him where he needs him to go. He throws the perfect right cross. The weight distribution is perfect. He comes back with a left hook and absolutely poleaxes Satterfield. He moved up in weight and beat Joe Lewis for the title. So the contemporaries that he had a hassle with, like Jimmy Bivens, could not manage.
He beat Archie Moore twice, of course.
3 times.
3 times. Sorry, yeah.
All within the light heavyweight limit.
Yeah, to me, like
he's the greatest light heavyweight of all time.
Yeah, to me, Charles embodies the idea of a boxer puncher, because to me the distinction is like when I call someone a boxer puncher, it's the skill set of a boxer and not just the power, but the confidence of a slugger, of a puncher. To have faith in your power and commit, and I think that's what really stood out about Charles, was like he really was at his best a blend of remarkably slick defense, like great eyes, fantastic head movement, but ferocious offense when he would let his hands go. And the only reason, I suspect the reason that Charles doesn't rank higher for you has something to do with the fact that his prime was cut short in a sense by some of the events in his career. I think he ultimately died of Lou Gehrig's disease. He was being affected by that well before it was diagnosed. And he also, I think, was known to sort of take the killer instinct out of his shots after he... who did he kill in the ring? Who was the fighter he killed?
Do you know what? I actually can't remember.
I'll if I can find the name, I might.
I'm never gonna search it. No, right? It's the kind of thing I used to know off by heart.
It was Sam Baruti.
And now it's right. Of course it was. See, remember that Homer Simpson quote? Every time I learn something new, it pushes something out of my brain. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But if you know, what I don't forget is that he beat Ken Overlin.
Yeah.
Yeah. He beat Gus Lesnovich, Jersey Joe Walcott, Joey Maxim, Charlie Burley, Lloyd Marshall, literally everyone who was anyone from welterweight to heavyweight, apart from like Marciano. That was, as you say, like right at the end of his career. And if you watch the fight with Harold Johnson that he loses, Harold Johnson, like top 10 like heavyweight of all time, it's one of the greatest two-way technical fights of all time. It's a real pleasure to watch.
Yeah.
Again, we need to do like an hour on as a chance.
It's one of those Curry Starling kind of fights. It's just a delight to watch these two guys try to figure each other out.
Yeah, Conti Sard 1 and McCallum Calambe 2.
Or McCallum Tony, I think, are those kinds of fights as well.
Yeah. I like to call them two-way technical fights.
Right.
That's what I call them, two-way technical fights, where both guys is at the peak of their technical prowess, and it's basically a battle of wits that somehow breaks into a fight.
Yeah.
I love those fights, man. Absolutely.
Same. Yeah, they're some of my favorites.
Virapol Saraprom versus Daurong Chuvatana. That's another one of my favorites.
I haven't seen that one.
You should watch it.
I will. You're going to have to write it down for me.
Virapol wins the bantamweight championship with just his fourth professional fight. It's absolutely incredible.
Nice. The Thai names are very difficult for me if you don't write them down.
Virapol's great. I'll write it down for you. Plenty of his fights on my channel. Number 5, Frank Bruno. What a fighter Frank Bruno was.
What an upset. I did not expect Bruno's head to pop in here.
Listen, man. What are you talking about, Connor? Great fighter. When he knocked out the likes of Jerry Coetzee and obviously the comeback win from Bone Crusher Smith really did show Frank Bruno's heart. Fantastic fighter. We'll do an hour on Frank at some stage.
You are a savage.
Brilliant fighter. Roberto Duran. I love Frank Bruno, by the way. It's just one fighter I could think of that would be funny, because it'd be funny to Frank Bruno at number 5 on a pound list.
He's not terrible at all. He's just not there. He's definitely not there.
Like if I put Zab Judah there, it's not quite as funny. Zab Judah is not quite a funny name as Frank Bruno.
To me, actually.
I think where Frank Bruno ends in like a vowel, it's kind of funnier than Zab Judah.
Kyle's theory on comedic boxing ratings.
It's like odd numbers are always funnier, aren't they?
I guess. I haven't really thought about it.
It's like I had 73 wanks yesterday. It's funnier than 20.
Oh my
and not just because it's a high number, because it's an odd number. 19 is quite a funny number, I think. Roberto Duran is number 5.
Coming in at number 19.
There you go. Number 5, Roberto Duran, for me, beat a top 10 featherweight of all time in Nesto Marçal, top 15 super featherweight of all time in Hiroshi Kobayashi, top 15 lightweight of all time, top 20 lightweight in Ken Buchanan. Other great world-class fighters like Esteban de Jesus and Gutsu Shimatsu, Suzuki, Carlos Palomino, Davey Moore. He's world champion at lightweight, welterweight, junior middleweight, fought up to super middleweight.
Some of the best post-prime longevity
and
of any.
I haven't even mentioned Sugar Ray Leonard yet.
Yeah, true.
Okay, he has a bad period in his career, but if you look at a lot of people say, Floyd would never have lost to Kirkland Lang. Floyd didn't fight in 5 decades.
Right.
So, there's a lot of things Duran did that Floyd hasn't done. There's a lot of things that Duran did that Floyd would never do for the right reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He lost to Benitez, obviously, and he was poleaxed by Tommy Hearns. He goes a distance of Marvin Hagler. It's insane. obviously he comes back. He beats Barkley, one of the greatest past prime performances of all time.
Yeah.
The next guy on the list is probably the only guy who can really top that. He beats two of the best light welterweights of the era as well, Monroe Brooks and Sol Mamby.
For anyone who wants to just appreciate like the kind of slickness that Duran was capable of, because I know a lot of people will say like a lot of people's defenses of a record like Floyd's for it having TBE status is like, oh well, look at like him taking this shot or getting hurt by this guy or knocked down by this guy or beaten by this guy. It's always like, as you said, Kyle, pointing out the mistakes. And if you want to see like, if you want to have a little better understanding of the wide array of styles that fighters can choose to use in the ring, but also how good some of these fighters are even at the things you don't think they can do, you should watch a YouTube video that's out there. I think it was in 1985. Roberto Duran went on a UK tour and sparred with several like top British amateurs and just toyed with them. Just played games with
Nigel Benn was one of them.
Yeah, and Nigel Benn actually kind of went a little too hard against Duran, and Duran didn't break a sweat. He didn't lose his calm. He just stopped Nigel Benn from hurting him and made it look good for like 3 rounds, and then he did some insane jump roping routine. So, and that was past his prime. That was well past his prime.
We're not even touching like all the like actual like world class contenders he beat. I'm just picking some. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how many fucking amazing fighters.
You can see the footage today of Duran sparring with Mosley and with
Sergio Mora.
Yeah, the Latin sock.
Teaching him shit.
Yeah, like catching him, like outclassing him. He's an old fucking man. His back won't straighten, and he's still like, yeah.
He's wearing jeans.
He's wearing jeans and like canvas gym shoes, and he's teaching Sergio Mora in live sparring. They're not going hard, but still, it gives you an impression of how deeply ingrained Duran's skill was and how capable he was over so many decades.
To give you an idea, fucking his debut was against a world class fighter.
Yeah,
he fought Carlos Mendoza, who ended up the fight fucking Wilfredo Gomez for the title.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, it was early on in his career as well, but that's the kind of competition you had to beat back in the day.
Yeah.
It's like when Fidel LaBarba and Jimmy McLachlan fought each other multiple times in their first 10 fights. We're talking about 2 of the McLachlan top 20, LaBarba certainly top 60 to 70, greatest fighters of all time, pound for pound.
And I think Duran's era, speaking of, like you mentioned earlier, getting a middle ground, usually a good approach. I think Duran's era may have been the ideal. Well, it depends on what you call Duran's era, but some of the era that Duran occupied is a good middle ground between the insane schedule of the really old timers and the really sparse schedule of today. Where
certainly
he wasn't fighting a crazy amount, but I think like you can attribute some of that environment to the level and diversity of skill we ultimately got out of Duran, because his skills were honed just right without being blunted by too much activity.
Absolutely incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Number 4, Sam Langford. Matt McGrane's number 1. I actually collaborated with a few of us did. We spoke to Matt McGrane, one of my good friends in the world of boxing historianism. Boxing historianism. Made a new word up. I can do whatever I want, man. I'm badass. And you know, I managed to convince him to get a lot of fighters into that top 100. He had Langford number 1. As I say, when you get to this level, I think this top 4. Maybe not Duran and not Charles, but this top 4 that are coming up, any of these guys could be number 1. Look at this as 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you consider that Langford, before he even found his power, was beating Joe Gans.
Right. And then, according to Langford, learned a lot of the tricks that would make him so special later from Joe Gans that night.
You have to bear in mind, of course, that Gans had travelled on. What we don't say. He travelled on a long train journey that day. That's the kind of shit you had to do back then.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but no kid's supposed to be beating Joe Gans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Certainly, no fighter is supposed to be fighting the best at top 5 at lightweight. I mean, I have him top 3 at lightweight, top 20 pound for pound fighter. Barbados Joe Walcott, I actually think gets overrated for his welterweight. A lot of people have him sort of top 5, top 10 at welterweight. I don't think that's the case. But an incredible pound-for-pound fighter, all the same. If you look at his early fights, he's fighting the likes of young Peter Jackson and Joe Gans and Barbados Joe Walcott. And then he's going up and he's fighting top 5 middleweight of all time, Stanley Ketchel. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. The likes of Jack Johnson. He's fighting Jack Johnson when he's not even in his prime. He can't get a fight with him when he's in his prime, so he beats all the other heavyweight contenders instead.
Harry Wills about 17 times they fought. I mean, that was post prime. That was mostly near the end. But
you know what I just said about most like crazy post prime wins of all time.
Yeah,
and how Duran, his one was the one against Barkley. Probably nothing more so than the 14th round KO of Harry Wills.
Yeah, with a one-eyed old Jack Johnson.
One eye, injured leg.
Yeah.
The lot. Wills is battering him. He can barely see, and he knocks him out all the same.
How high would you rate Wills?
He's a top 20 heavyweight of all time.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these guys who gives Wills and Burley more credit because then they need to, because Burley gets ranked top 20 of all time, top 10 welterweight. They did not get the opportunities they deserved, but they did not beat the number one in the division either. It's a real hard balancing act where I didn't rank Jack Johnson that high because he didn't fight him. I don't rank Tony Zale in the top 10 middleweights because he didn't fight any of the Murderers Row and shit. Do you know what I mean? It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Those eras kind of become limbo eras. This one does as well. I think Johnson beat all those guys, not Wills, but Jeanette and McVeigh and Langford pre-prime.
So what allows? Fair. Is it the longevity, the schedule that allows Langford to? Because Langford also operated in an era with a lot of those divisions where he
also knocked out Tiger Flowers.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He never won a world title, but look at all the titleists he beat.
Right. So he beat so many other guys who were successful and credible titleists over such a long period of time, and also if you're fighting and beating guys who are ranked in the top 5 and 10s of their divisions. Yeah,
lots of them. And again, we're only literally scraping the surface of Langford. Also on film, he looks amazing.
Yeah, he still looks really sharp.
You see him chase around like Bill Lang was saying, and you could think that I hate to use him as an example again, but he's an easy guy to pick. He could chase Marco Huck around the ring today.
Poor Marco Huck.
He's just the guy I keep picking because he's kind of awkward, but he's tough.
You can honestly, I watched Hook versus Breedis, so you can honestly talk as much shit about Marco Huck as you please. I will not complain.
I love Marco Huck.
Yeah, but Hook Breedis was such...
We need to do a fucking thing about the cruiserweight soon, man.
Oh, for sure. But don't tell me you thought Hook Breedis was fun to watch. It was one of the ugliest fights I've ever seen.
No, but it was fun to watch Breedis, though. I mean, I love Breedis.
Yeah, but the fight was so bad. Okay, all right, anyway. I'll move
Anyway,
I'll move past it.
Segue, man. Langford would not be in a bad fight with Huck. So, yeah, Langford. Number 3.
Langford would probably obliterate Hook, I think.
Yeah. This guy might as well. Sugar Ray Robinson.
Sure.
He probably wouldn't. But look,
he might. I mean, I wouldn't be that shocked, honestly.
If it wasn't too hot in the arena, maybe. We're getting to fighters now who literally don't need any introduction.
Yeah.
Ray Robinson beat, for me, the second greatest welterweight of all time in Kid Gavilan twice. Yeah?
Yeah.
He lost the title and came back and knocked out Gene Former, the only guy to actually knock him out. Yeah? The likes of Bobo Olsen. He was past his prime. He destroyed Graziano, who was more of a fun, Gatti level fighter. But if we're going to give, Mayweather the best performance of Mayweather's career was against Gatti, it wasn't.
Maybe you could say the best performance. Maybe not the most meaningful, but just as a spectacle.
For me, I'll take as a spectacle, but I'll take much more much more impressive when he schooled Castillo in their second fight.
Yeah, I still take Corrales over most of it in terms of just the optics of watching Mayweather outbox someone.
Yeah. I can take that. All day. But look, Robinson, he beats guys like Holly Mims.
Yeah.
Fucking amazing middleweight. Most people don't know about. I just uploaded one of his fights to YouTube. People should watch it. Obviously, Lamotta, top 10 middleweight of all time, late in the top 10s, but he's still there. So many great welters, so many great middleweights. Unlucky he didn't beat Maxim, which is probably why he isn't number 2. It was hot.
God
it's hot
beat
for
him.
Maxim as well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, God beat him, but God did not beat Joey Maxim, so you still have to hold it against Sugar Ray.
People don't realise that it was like Robinson went from welterweight to middleweight to light heavyweight. He started off as a lightweight kid.
Yeah.
He was a lightweight. And I think you can see him fighting Sami Zayn got online. Obviously, eventually when he was fighting him, he was more of a welterweight. He avenges his hero, Henry Armstrong's losses to Fritzy Zivic, and it's just unbelievable the amount of names that are on Robinson's record. Obviously, he looks incredible on film. He's a boxer puncher for me. The one thing he didn't really have much great was defence. He had some defensive moves. He was not a great defensive fighter because he didn't need to be. He had one of the greatest chins of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the top 5 greatest punches of all time, greatest jabs of all time, hand speed, blah 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 blah.
Robinson, you got to give him like what this is again where I think the elitism that some boxing historians have falls away. I think Robinson is an example of not being an elitist as far as like technical brilliance or savvy or whatever. Because Robinson was so great because he just made the most.
He's a fighter.
Yeah, he made the most of his physical capabilities and his mental conditioning. Like, he was just a tough motherfucker who went in there to kill people. Like, that was his style. And he did it really, really exceptionally well. Like, he was a guy who had the skills, relative skills of a guy like an Ezra Charles or a Floyd Mayweather or whoever you want to call, like, the great slick fighter of their generation. Except he was just a killer. So
he was a killer. He was he'd make guys just straight out fight him and beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
And look at the guys he was doing it to. But he's the kind of guy we don't really talk about much. But it's a guy that he beat. That is my number 2. One of his favourite fighters, Henry Armstrong.
Right.
Because although I think his welterweight reign gets a little bit overrated because mainly he was fighting the guys he should have been fighting at lightweight, but they just weighed a little bit. They just came in a little bit heavier because obviously Armstrong defended the welterweight title mainly like sort of weighing in as a lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
He was a destroyer at featherweight and beat some immense featherweights. He held the featherweight, lightweight, welterweight title not all at the same time pretty much, but he should have also won the middleweight title against the guy he'd already beat, obviously Sefrino Garcia. Most reporters at the time assumed it was a dodgy decision. Lew Ambrose, one of the greatest lightweights of all time, absolutely incredible. This is so, but he smashes up Barney Ross.
Yep, destroys him and just like he carried Barney
but he
Ross.
Can't finish him. He can't finish him because he's so fucking tough.
True, but he also could have it like destroyed some of the last years of Barney Ross's life more than he did, I think. The story, at least from Springs Toledo's book, is that I think the story comes from Ross, that Armstrong came out in like the 13th round or something and said, how are you feeling? And Barney Ross said, I'm done. And he said, jab and move and I'll make it look good. And basically carried Ross to the finish because he may not have put Ross away as not a huge like power puncher, but similar to a guy that I think you'll be mentioning very soon, he just piled it on and it never stopped. So that might have been
film
some...
as well. He looks incredible. He uses a lot of similar moves. Not at all a Customato style, but if you see the way he fights in close, it's very similar to Tyson, the way he sort of creates space.
Yeah, or compare him to guys like Frazier, Kawi, like good aggressive defensive artists. Like Armstrong was, he would have hung it well in any era because he made everybody fight his fight. You just had to fight Henry Armstrong's fight when you fought him at his best.
Even past his best, he managed to outfight like the murderous punching Bummy Davis, who's one of like the hardest pure punches of the era.
Yeah, you would still have to fight, similar to Ray Robinson, but just a very different approach. Like just constant aggression, tireless aggression.
An incredible fighter. Baby Arizmendi and Juan Zarita and Rodolfo Casanova and all these amazing smaller guys and just absolutely just an incredible midget. Well past his best all the same. But
what was that name? Midget who?
Midget Wolgast.
Midget Wolgast. Boy, you could literally just read a box rec list of boxers' names from the 40s.
I didn't have to read that one. Midget Wolgast, top 10 flyweight.
Oh, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying, just the sound of the names is so fun to me.
Great fighter.
Midget
Pete Saran
Wolgast
as well, and so many great fighters that Armstrong beat, but he's not the number 1. He could be. He's 1.2 today. Maybe tomorrow I have him number 1.
Al Bummy Davis.
But, Bummy Davis, man, what a name.
Yeah, I'm just
Murderous
enjoying
puncher.
names now.
I think he fought some muggers off with his bare hands and they shot him to death.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was more dangerous than those guys, though, trust me.
Jesus
They didn't have a
Christ.
gun, he would have killed them both. But
Jesus.
if you beat the only man to legitimately beat Gene Tunney, if you beat Tommy Loughran multiple times on the greatest lightweights of all time, Tommy Gibbons, Mike O'Dowd, Kid Norfolk, robbed against Tiger Flowers. I mean, Mickey Walker, top 15, top 20s. I didn't mention him earlier. He's in my 11 to 20.
And like Langford, you do a lot of this with one eye, with failing health.
Or one arm.
Yeah,
Greg
right.
did for 1 year, I think, or a broken arm.
The description from Gods of War is that his forearm was so bent that all of his jabs were hooks.
There you go.
And he still fought on through that injury for a couple rounds.
Contemporary reports paint you as the greatest offensive fighter and the greatest defensive fighter. It's kind of like mixing Pernell Whitaker with Henry Armstrong.
Yeah.
Although he probably wouldn't look like this, we can't really envision how Greb looked, mainly because there should never have been a fighter this good.
Yeah, I also get, like Robinson, I get the impression from accounts, because of course we have to talk about accounts, because the somewhat controversial thing whenever you bring up Greb and call him the greatest is that there's no footage. You have to just go on what you know about the people that he beat and the descriptions of him. But
I think what I do is I always say, watch who he beat.
Sure,
Mickey Walker.
Yeah. You can watch
looks
his
great.
opponents.
Gene Tunney looks great. Loughran looks great. The Gibbons brothers look great. They all look great on film. How great must the fighter have been that beat these guys?
But based on the accounts, it may not have even been that pretty to watch Harry Greb fight, but it was definitely stunning. Everybody remarked on just the lightning quick windmill that Harry Greb was when he got his opponent in position to attack.
And again, you could do 2 hours on just who he beat. I mentioned guys like Jimmy Slattery and Maxie Rosenblum and Jeff Smith multiple times. I mean, it should never have happened. It should never have happened. And it did happen. So
why don't we wrap up your top 10 this way? Why don't we put a capstone on it by saying, how do you think, just to troll people, how do you think a fight between Harry Greb and Floyd Mayweather would have looked from a pound-for-pound perspective?
What a bizarre thing to ask, but you got to think is that Greb was apparently a guy with unlimited stamina, with an undentable chin, who was really fast, punched at weird angles, didn't stop throwing, was hard to hit himself. He's fighting a guy who's relatively low output, who wins on clean punches, who likes to fight at his own pace. I think it would be a slaughter, to be honest with you. This is a guy who fought heavyweights and who Jack Dempsey would not fight.
Yeah, you think it might have been like shades of... Well, if we're talking from a pound-for-pound perspective, we'll say I guess how big was Greb actually? What did he weigh at his biggest?
He was like a sort of natural super middleweight, 166 to 168. Okay.
So if we assume no severe
160.
No severe weight advantage for Greb, I still think just
but
based on
Mayweather beat bigger fighters.
Sure, yeah, but just based on the accounts of the time, I think Greb versus Mayweather, the contrast might have been. You might have been forced to recall the Castillo fight, the Maidana fight, the little moments where Mayweather was put in trouble or was forced to think quickly and react.
Times about 10.
Yeah, right, like that, but it just doesn't stop. There's no second wind.
He is tough as fuck.
Yeah,
he'd go the distance probably. I mean, it's not like Greb early on in his career was a welterweight, and he did struggle with really smaller, faster guys, but he was still not in his prime.
Yeah, but I
think if he can get past the jab of Tommy Loughran,
right,
and the movement of Gene Tunney, and the fighting ability of Mickey Walker,
yeah,
who's going to beat him? He basically barely even lost in his prime years that went over years. By the time he got the beating of the likes of Mike O'Dowd and Mike Gibbons and Tommy Gibbons, he couldn't lose to them. It took him a while. He lost to these guys, but so would anyone. Marvin Hagler and Monzon would lose to some of these guys, at least one out of 3.
Well, and that's the strong contrast with an era where somebody's allowed to go 50-0, and that's the end of their career. Part of the reason that somebody like Harry Greb outranks somebody like Mayweather. And again, this is not to disparage Floyd. It's just the world that Harry Greb boxed in, that his style grew up in, that he experienced as a fighter, I think in a lot of ways it made him better. Like, he was just able to, he fought more guys. He lost some of those fights, but because he was tested so much, he came out stronger than just about anybody else.
Well, we were talking about that versatility, man.
Yeah.
Greb had to prove himself against every single style. He's probably, for me, the greatest middleweight and greatest light heavyweight of all time.
Yeah.
So, two of the strongest divisions in history, you've got to be number one.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. Kyle McLachlan's rankings of the 10 fighters greater than Floyd Mayweather. Parentheses, not to disparage Floyd Mayweather. He's actually a very good fighter and ranks in the top fighters of all time. He's just not quite up there. That's it. That's the point of the show. We just want to give you guys a little context. I know Kyle have a lot of respect for his knowledge of boxing history, and he's got a great eye for the kind of analytical stuff that I do as well. And so I give your rankings, Kyle, a lot of weight. I think a lot of serious thought goes into them. And I just think it helps to put into context what we see and to know like what the heights that have been reached really are. And certain environments lead for certain environments just create the opportunities for great fighters, and certain ones don't. Ours has the opportunity for a very rich fighter, and in that respect, Floyd Mayweather is the greatest. He's certainly the greatest at making money from boxing. But
point.
His world his world is just not designed in a sense. Maybe if you put Floyd Mayweather in Harry Greb's era with that kind of conditioning, with those opponents, maybe he would have come close. But we have to look at what they actually did, and in terms of what they actually did.
Let me make one more point.
Yeah.
I hate ranking fighters when they're still active or like just retired.
Sure.
I like the dust to settle a little bit. Let's revisit this in 5-10 years and see what we think of Mayweather then.
All right, episode 2 of the new Fistorical Perspective. In 10 years, we will revisit these pound for pound rankings. And anyway, that does it. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Thank you for joining us. Kyle, thank you for joining me, for hooking back up.
Thanks for having me, man. I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah, had a great time. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you again. We're going to try and do these on a semi-regular basis, maybe at least once a month. No promises, but that's our goal. So we'll see you later. Future episodes are all going to be on the Patreon of Heavy Hands, $3 a month, and you've got all kinds of bonus content and community with other podcast listeners and, all kinds of fluffy shit. So go check that out, and you'll hear future episodes of this show. And we'll see you next time. Do we have a sign-off for this? Did we used to do a sign-off of any kind?
No, I don't think we did. I think we just kind of petered out and just faded away into obscurity like these great boxers we've been talking about.
So how about this? Bye! Why?
That's what it should be.
Why? Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Why not? It's positive.
Okay, give me one more. Let me get it clean.
Right, you got to give the bye.
Okay, all right. Bye.
Oh, yeah.
That is not good, but I'm going to use it.